Before I start this video, which I do consider an important video for those who may be living near wind farms, I want to relate a story to you that I find important. I was asked to help with a solar farm proposal just outside Swansea in Wales, and I went along to a public meeting about it. The people there were PR people. They didn't understand anything technical. But when I asked for the environmental report, given that the solar farm was right on an ancient woodland, certified ancient woodland, that there were a huge, actually a number of species of bats there, and they were putting radio towers up and everything. And there were badgers there, badger sets where they were actually put in the solar farm. I said, where's your environmental report? And they told me, in Wales, we do not need one because it's strategic, because we're supplying 10,000 houses. No need for one. In a later meeting, they told locals that no need to worry, there's no badgers there because they spent a few hours in the afternoon looking for them and they couldn't see any. And they thought that was enough. Of course, every local knew there were badgers there, and so on. You could see the scrapings, you could see all sorts of evidence, and they were familiar to the people. But of course, badgers only come out at night. That's the sort of level of environmental care in Wales that we give. And of course, strategic saying 10,000 homes was only if the homes were supplied, 80% of the power came from gas, because every single wind and solar farm in the UK lies to me about the number of homes it can supply, because it assumes when it gives that figure 80% is coming from gas, which they're trying to do away with. I think that's not a good way to express it. So in actual fact it was 2,000 homes, and because of the transmission losses from the remote site, probably as up as high as 70%, more like 1,600 homes, not 10,000. But so it wasn't strategic in my view, even then. So this is an example of how much care of the environment happens with renewable. The environment is overridden in many ways. And that's why this is the start of a series of videos by me on wind farms and solar farms and their environmental impact. And I will try to be fair to both sides here. I'm not interested in just giving alarmism. I'm not interested in just exaggerating one side or the other. I'm interested in getting to the truth. So here we are. This first one of many to come is about the sound, infrasound, audible sound and infrasound. That's the sound you can't hear from wind farms. Enjoy. Whilst this video is directed at the Isle of Man, my Isle of Man project, it is also applicable everywhere. Now that Miliband has allowed onshore wind farms again in the UK, we're going to have all sorts of issues. And this particular one, the one that follows this, by the way, is going to be to do with microplastic pollution downstream of the wind farms, because the blades lose the plastic and spread toxic plastic, basically, microplastic. So, but that's the next one. This one is just going to be concerned with sound, and I'm going to be concerned with two types of sound. So let me explain that very simply. The sound you're hearing now is in your audible range, but bats you can't hear. If you want to listen to bats, you have to have a special device to listen to them. They're high frequency, and also you can't hear very low frequency, below about 20 hertz. So in the range of audible hearing, I'm going to show you what to expect from the turbines. Now, the samples I've got, unfortunately, and they are properly controlled samples of what you'll hear, the samples you've got of the audible range are based on a smaller turbine, I'm afraid, a much smaller turbine than generally we're getting now, and smaller blade lengths. So the sound will be more than this. I think the worst thing about it you'll find is a slight pulsing all the time. So that's the first type of sound, the audible sound. The second and even more concerning sound is the inaudible sound. You can't hear it. and it's a very, very low frequency waves, long wavelength waves that can go right through the building, can resonate the building you're in, and can cause mega health problems. So I'm going to give you some samples of that. Now, the consultants in the Isle of Man have dismissed infrasound as, so lots of studies, sort of nothing. I'm sorry, it's not as simple as that. Now, I do take the scientific approach, but when you have so much evidence from all around the world of the damage wind farms are doing at distances up to 1.5 miles actually from the turbine. So if you put a 1.5 mile radius around the turbines in the Isle of Man, you get an idea of the distance we're talking about. And some of the sound signals I'll be showing you are at good distances. We're going to move on to the infrasound because your body has hollow spaces in it. Well, you've got your mouth, you've got your ears, that's a big one. You've got your chest, your abdomen spaces, and so on. This infrasound can vibrate these spaces. The normal effect, it can get very serious, but the normal effect is to be seasick. But if you're seasick in your house all the time, that's a problem. And the problem is you can actually have it lower outside, but when this infrasound hits your house, the house itself resonates, and it's louder inside the house than it is outside the house. That's the issue. Now, for what you're getting, I'm totally against this project in the Isle of Man. You should have guessed that by now for the work I'm putting in, because it's going to contribute so little energy. You're going to have, an eighth of your energy, in my opinion, an eighth of your energy demand, and it's going to cause all sorts of eruptions and things and all sorts of extra costs, and it's going to be more expensive. There's no doubt about that. So whilst being against it, I've got to be fair both ways. So I'm inviting your consultant to give us research papers and counter this video, because if they can't do that, then you should be very concerned. We've ended up with a number of people having to sell their houses. The trouble is they can't sell them because once word gets around what it's like to be there, you can't sell them. They've had to just abandon the house, unable to sell it. That's how bad this can get. So the effect of a wind farm can be also to lower prices in quite a big area. And you'll understand why, I think, when you've gone through all this video. I'm not a sound expert. Yes, I can look, I actually deal quite a lot with sound in many ways. Now, it isn't just humans that are affected, it's cattle. And we're talking here about farmers losing their entire livelihood in cattle and other animals. So the sample I've got in this is cattle. And so that's that. And also chickens, believe it or not, badly affected. And so we're going to first of all deal with the audible, and then we're going to deal with the big problem of the infrasound. So it's going to be a fairly long video because I'm taking clips from various interviews I've found to give you a feel of the problem. My advice to you is to strongly react, and certainly don't trust existing consultants to do infrasound surveys, as it were. A lot of the surveys that are being done are using meters that are only in the audible range. Well, that's meaningless because we're talking outside that. That's like trying to listen to bats without the special device to listen to bats. And you have to listen to those. So you need really specialist equipment. And the problem here is this. We don't really know what it's going to be like until it's put up. And then it's too late. And it can ruin an entire area. I mean, it can ruin a huge amount of homes in the Isle of Man. And that goes for England and Scotland and Wales as we're putting up more and more turbines. Where anywhere near people, you have a problem with infrasound. And again, the video following this will be dealing with other issues to do with wind farms, such as the wind vanes shedding plastic all the time, and there's toxic materials in the plastic, and that spreads over a wide area, gets into the soil, and keeps building up over the years. So we're going to look into that as well, but that's another video. Now, these videos are taking me some time now, so I've done some quick ones. I've done a video a day, actually, for the last 3 days. This is going to be a little bit slower, but I think it's worthwhile. And if I were you, if it was my home, I'd be fighting this to my last breath, because I wouldn't be prepared to take the risk of them going up. Well, that's up to you. And I really would advise that before it gets anywhere near planning, if this is still being bulldozed ahead, if it gets anywhere near planning, we cooperate more. Now, there might be some follow-up videos to this because I'll be doing interviews with specialists on infrasound, so you yourselves can judge. Okay, so that's it. So thank you for joining again. I hope you find this interesting, and if you're going to have a wind fire anywhere near you in the UK, this is worth watching. We're very lucky. A major consultancy company made a video with the actual sounds at different distances, etc., different backgrounds and different wind speeds from a turbine. And whilst this turbine is smaller than the ones you're going to have in the Elements, so the sound will be greater, this was going to give you a good idea of what you get at different distances from a single wind vane. Of course, you'll have 3 or 4 of these wind vanes, and that'll also increase the sound volume in that sense. So here we go. I'm going to just use clips from this, but I will be putting little notes on as we go through. Please watch.
We know that people want accurate information about what a wind farm sounds like. The soundtrack on this presentation is an accurate reproduction of that sound.
These audible range tests are going to be done at 2 kilometers, 1 kilometer, half a kilometer, and 250 meters.
First, a calm day in the open. Next, a day with light breeze in foliage. Now, let's remove the background sound. All you're hearing now is a Studland Bay turbine from 2 kilometers away.
Now, you may notice even at 2 kilometers, with just the turbine noise, that's what you were just hearing, it's quite loud actually. And this is the audible range we're talking, don't forget. And what I've done here is I've drilled down into it. I've, if you like, opened up the time scale to look into a smaller time scale. And you can see the banding there. This because it's throbbing. There's rhythms, pulse rhythms. So there's a wide one there, and then the short ones. A wide one, and then the short ones. This is the pulsing rhythm that you can hear. And that's particularly disturbing.
Let's go closer to the turbine. Now we're 1 kilometre away. On a calm day, on a day with light winds, and without any background sound. Closer still, this time, we've moved to within 500 metres of the turbine. This is what a Studland Bay turbine sounds like from 500 metres away on a calm day. With a light breeze in foliage. And with no background sound. Finally, let's move in almost to the foot of the turbine, just 250 metres away. A calm day. A light breeze. And with no background sound. But what about when the wind blows harder? Here's the background sound alone of a windy day, with winds around 10 metres per second, or about 20 knots. Now, let's add the sound of the turbine. Remember, we're close now, just 250 metres away. Now, let's go back to 1 kilometre from the turbine. That's actually closer to the turbine than the closest farmhouse at Studland Bay. If the occupants of that house had a window open, this is what they'd hear on a calm day. And if they closed it, a normal single glaze window, they'd hear this.
Okay, so what you've heard so far is about audible sound and what you can hear. And that there's enough of that at distance to really concern people, because it can ruin the value of your home. Who would want to rent a holiday home with that sound in the background all the time? And never mind the animals, because animals are highly affected by it. But so we've got now a centre of noise pollution where the turbine is. And that noise is a pulsing noise. And underlying it all is this pulse, this pulse, this pulse. Don't forget the tips of these larger turbines are turning, almost up to 200 miles an hour. They are really very fast. There's a limit at about 200 that you can't really pass because of turbulence reasons, which reduces the efficiency. But, that's what we're talking about. And these things are, higher than St. Paul's Cathedral or Blackpool Tower, etc. So they are massive, and the ones in the Isle of Man that are being proposed, and most of England being proposed, are these larger ones. And in Wales, where I live, right down beautiful valleys, we have pylons or wind farms, all over the place are being planned. So this video very much concerns everybody in the UK, if not the world. So what we're going to do now is move on to infrasound. This is a very low level, long wavelength sound that can penetrate buildings, resonate buildings, so you can even have a higher volume inside the building than you have outside the building, right? So it's like a resonance. And as I've explained before, it's to do with this interfering with the voids inside a human body, such as the mouth, the throat, stomach, the ears, most of all the ears, and so on. So this resonance, etc., is similar, and the mildest form is similar to seasickness. Now, I've sailed around the world and in my own boat, and mostly around the world anyway. I've done the 3 oceans, the Indian, the Atlantic, and the Pacific. And I've obviously had to deal with seasickness. Now, I really am not really subject to it, although I have been just twice in the 10 years cruising. Other people, as soon as they step aboard a boat, feel queasy. And those people are badly affected by infrasound, very badly. So that's a good indication. So a kid being sick in a car, which I have experienced, as I've had 4 kids and 10 grandkids, some of them are more susceptible than others. They're highly susceptible. So what you've got to imagine is being seasick in your house all the time. Now, seasickness can drive people to almost suicide. So it gets so bad that people have to leave their houses, and they can't even manage to sell their houses. They just have to abandon them. So this is what you're risking. And of course, you won't know the answer to how bad it's going to be until the wind farm's up. And I'm going to repeat something here. If what I'm saying in this video is unscientific or can be refuted in any way, I ask the consulting engineers acting on behalf of Manx Utilities to counter me with science and evidence against it. I have looked for it and I haven't found it. So here we go into infrasound. This is a nurse. Infrasound has forced this woman from her home. She has to sleep at her daughter's house. This is her story.
She was forced to leave her beloved profession.
I love nursing. A nurse is what I am. It's the gift God gave me. I had the dream career of teaching nursing students. Dream career. Nursing students are just the best thing on earth.
Her health, her life in peril, Norma's doctor advised her to leave her home, the home she loved. Norma's world crumbled.
So I begged them to buy me out. And I really thought I could walk away. But I kept coming back. And I kept coming back. And it's like ripping my heart out, my heart and my soul. It's not a house, it's not four walls. It's the place we buried our pets. It's the place my tulips are out there, my 4 and my 5-year-old. Planted when they were tiny dots. It's memories that I want to carry to my grandchildren. It's my heart and my soul that I've left behind here. And now I'm in a room in my daughter's house. That's not my home. That's not my heart and soul. I'm in a town where I don't want to be.
We've been talking about the noise and the vibration in our home for a long time, and to have Stephen Cooper come and do such an intensive study means a lot to me and to the other residents.
Although hearing impaired, Melissa says she can sense the turbines. Often the sensation drives her from her home.
The noise and the vibration come up through the pillow, the impact's worse than when you're standing just listening.
Issues were sleep deprivation or sleep disturbances. My wife and also my youngest son, who was 6 months old when the windmills went online. Also anxiety for my wife and some speech difficulties for my youngest son, who was 2 when we moved out. His habits changed dramatically within a week to 2 weeks of moving out.
So I am currently sleeping in the basement, and I have been sleeping in the basement probably for the past 7 years, 8 years. I miss sleeping by him.
So many nights, neither one of us sleep, and first question that we ask each other every morning is,
How did you sleep?
how much sleep did you get? Did you sleep last night? And there are nights when we do sleep that when you wake up in the morning, you feel as though you didn't get any sleep, because I guess your body is just being attacked so much from the vibrations. The World Health Organization recommends a minimum of indoor noise at 24 decibels.
The effect of the turbines on our lives has been devastating.
Michael and Dorothy Keane left Wicklow and came to Roscommon to retire. But now the noise from 2 wind turbines, standing up to 100 metres tall near their home, is causing distress.
We had to go to the doctor both, and the advice we got from him, because of the impact that the noise was having on our lives, was that the best thing that we can do is move house.
We came up here for peace and quiet to live out the remaining years of our life, and this is what happens, and we're not the only people.
And then another single duvet and another fleece.
These are the measures the Keanes have taken to try and limit the sound inside their house.
With 2 inches of polystyrene insulation.
The company that constructed these turbines says the sound coming from them is within the threshold allowed under their planning permission. And when you pass here, it's difficult to hear anything. But when you stop at their home, 700 metres from the turbines, you can hear a low, rhythmic, persistent sound that's much louder in high winds.
But you know, this is about jobs. This is about creating wealth for Ireland and for the Midlands.
Energy Minister Pat Rabbitte says the planning laws for wind farms are under review. But with hundreds of turbines expected to go up, he sees a major economic boost.
Why is the emphasis on the protest?
Well, I will interrupt there to tell you why the emphasis is on the protest, because it's people's lives, not what you're going to say. Don't stand in the way of progress. These politicians are really, really way out.
We're creating new jobs in a new industry, in a sector that is renewable, in a sector that brings down the cost of energy to Ireland.
And as the debate continues, planning issues are expected to be finalised over the next 2 years. But for some, it's coming too late.
I want to make my home, for my wife, a safe, quiet place, which we thought we had done.
Ciara Malooly, RTE News, on Scrine Hill in County Roscommon.
Basically ended up losing all the cattle because we had so many injuries, deaths, milk production, because I was right around that 75, 80 pounds of milk a cow. And within about 3 weeks after the turbines went up, we were down to 28 pounds a cow. The first approximately 9 months, we had 70 plus animals that either died or went down that had to be euthanized. And it just got to the point that we couldn't survive anymore on the cattle, and we didn't want to put the cattle through all the effects that they were getting off the turbines.
Put the wind turbines up on a hill like they are in the Isle of Man, for example. Depending on the angle of sun, you can get wind shadows spreading for a huge distance, and they can be very annoying. I'm just going to show you what they look like, and then I'll just leave it at that. You yourselves can judge how annoying that would be to be living by. And not just for long distances in the open countryside. It can affect your home. This is, we're going towards dusk, the sun is low, and this is what you're getting inside a home. Well, I haven't tried to linger on victims. I needed to expose around the world, that's Ireland, Australia, America, I needed to expose the problems that are happening near wind farms. And I can tell you now that experts are recommending up to 1.5 miles distance to be safe. That's a radius all the way round the turbines. So around about a 3-mile diameter circle around the turbines for it to be safe, to make sure the low sound infrasound waves get absorbed before they do damage to you, your animals, and so on. And by the way, there are countless examples there. When the person was removed from the house, they were okay. When they came back to the house, they weren't. And with animals as well, there's experiments, they've removed the animals and they've recovered. I mean, chickens, for example, stopped laying and were behaving really badly. They removed the chickens for a week, but actually the first 4 or 5 days all they did was sleep, and then slowly they recovered and started egg laying again. They took them back and the cycle repeated. So there's lots of evidence like that. Now, planning laws were mentioned there, so I ought to mention them. The planning laws don't even take it into account. So You know, in England now, with Miliband, our mad Miliband energy minister, pushing ahead, it's got to go through planning, and I am advising all the people opposing them to go into this infrasound issue, because they've got to be able to do that and measure the amount down to 1 hertz, even down to a very, very low frequency. That's what's going to be coming from there. So the planning regulations right around the world do not allow for inaudible infrasound. And that's got it. Now, there is some news, and I'll be explaining it later, in New York, where people are waking up, where the authorities are now waking up about wind farms, but we'll discuss that later. So let's look in to the other side of this equation first. What is the typical response from the wind farm industry? Well, you've seen one little clip there where the bloke said, well, you know, you just sacrifice yourself for the jobs. And these jobs are fictional, by the way, and the whole purpose of the wind farms are fictional. The whole thing is madness in the extreme, the whole net zero. But even if you believe in it, you can't go around damaging people, removing their assets, removing their livelihood in the case of the farm there, and so on. You can't go around doing that. And so we've really got to wake up to onshore wind farms and the damage they do. Offshore, by the way, also does damage, and there's a whole issue on Wales. Because this video is going to be fairly long, I'm going to move the Wales one and the sea, the damage done in the sea, to another video. But I was going to include it originally. By the way, I keep changing costume because these videos take a week or two to make. They're not done overnight, and I'm not bothered about continuity with costumes. Okay, so let's look now into what the wind farm industry says in response to these complaints.
If you go to the peak medical body, they will tell you that there's no causal link between wind farms and health.
It's a concept supported by Sydney University's School of Public Health's Professor Simon Chapman, not a medical specialist, but an avowed enemy of wind farm critics.
You can see I've put some examples of quotes there, conclusions. There's no evidence that the audible or subaudible sounds emitted by wind turbines have any direct adverse physiological effects.
Now let's just take that first reference there, Colby. And I looked into that, and this is what I found. This paper is so bad. There's a report here written by Wayne Gulden that really rips it apart in every sense, and you can go into it, easy to look that up on the internet, and it's so bad, the report, that you're lost for words. And I will just give you the header to Wayne's report on it. I have more details at the end, but in summary, there is no scientific technique I'm aware of to get from these references to his conclusions. It's hard to express just how poorly this research was done. It's not that I agree or disagree with the conclusions. People of goodwill can arguably still do that. It's that the references were uniformly some combination of irrelevant, erroneous, non-illuminating and biased, and I didn't write the preceding sentence lightly. What is the most disappointing is that this report is portrayed as being authoritative, as evidenced by the local newspaper and CBC, and the entire 25 minutes illuminating the Colby reference in 21 minutes into it. And it goes on. He has even been referenced to as the nation's foremost expert. So if you read this paper that exposes the Colby paper, you can begin to understand just how biased this all is. Now, I've got to be fair. There is a report on the other side, a study, a decent scientific study, and it's here. Now, this study took 37 people, put them into rooms and exposed them to infrasound, and then did a very detailed analysis of how it affected them. The conclusion was it didn't. My problem with that is that it's not the same as doing a wind farm infrared sound, which is into a huge concrete base. And it can be the base itself that's also vibrating through the earth. So let me explain this. We already know that shortwave, high frequency, which is shortwave sound, dissipates quite quickly. It's almost as if the shape of it can't get through. whereas long wave really gets through and travels a long distance. So much so that it's quite interesting. It's in the war to try to, before in the 1930s, before we'd fully developed radar, we actually built these sound dishes in the south of England, and these were to pick up German planes coming towards us, crossing France. Tens and tens of miles away, 20, 30, 40 miles away. And the sound would be gathered in the dish and then focused to a central point onto a microphone that could detect it. And these really weren't used much because radar took over, but that's what they were built for, because a low frequency sound, long wave sound, travels a long way. And so my concern is that the study that the other side bases a lot of weight on was a laboratory study that is not quite the same. So, for example, how the huge foundations can be vibrating. You've got this thing as high as the Eiffel Tower, or as bigger than Blackpool Tower, whatever it's going to be, and you've got this vibrating, and that vibrates the base, which itself vibrates through Earth. In the individual case of the Isle of Man, of course, the wind farm is basically in a very wet area, a lot of water. In fact, it's got particular drainage problems. And the water is going to transmit that infrasound extremely well, as bog will. So it does depend on the topography and the geology of the area. But you can never tell what you're going to get until the wind farm is up. At this point, I'm going to interject with just one peer-reviewed paper, a recent one, from a doctor, and here is what she has to say about infrasound from wind farms. Infrasound is then transmitted not only through the air, but through the ground, via the tower, and can penetrate houses. Buildings, therefore, offer no protection. On the contrary, airborne and ground-borne infrasound can add up considerably indoors. What turbines do is not only produce infrasound, but extremely strong bursts of infrasound, extremely strong and rapid, many times a second bursts of pressure. And that, dear reader, is undoubtedly the chief reason why people become ill. Dr. Belud Stayek. So we know that energy, long-wave sound, goes through air. We know that. We know it goes through water. Whales use it for hundreds of miles away. They communicate with it. That's causing a big problem, by the way, with offshore wind in America. It's a separate video now. And we also know, besides water, it travels through metal. It travels through houses. If you're inside a house with everything shut off, you can still hear the thud, thud, thud of distant music. And you'll hear the thud, thud, thud before you hear the high frequency parts of that music. But it also travels through the earth itself. And therefore, travelling through the earth itself can vibrate your house, and in effect, it can get into the resonance of your house. And that's why sometimes the feeling of this, the sound volume of the infrasound is higher in the house than it is outside the house. So it's all these factors. So why I reject that study as being fair, although it's a reasonable attempt, I will say that, I would say it's not the same as in practice. And the problem above all, because of topography, the nature of the land and everything, is you don't know the result of all this until it's put up. That's the problem. So I'll be linking that study, the opposite study, so you can look at it in detail in the description below. My job here is to expose the issue to you and to enable the people who are fighting these wind farms, which is going to happen a lot now throughout the UK, to enable them to understand what's going on, because infrasound is definitely a problem and it has to be exposed as that. What you're going to hear next is the typical response to raising the infrasound issue from the wind farm industry. This time it's Paul Evans, the Isle of Man consultant, pushing the new wind farm there, but it would be the same pretty well everywhere, I think. It is an audio recording, but I will comment as we go through it.
What's your take on some of the people I've spoken to today were talking about infrasound, off the turbine? Yeah. What's your take on that? I mean, there's been lots of studies, lots and lots of studies. I mean, the whole point of infrasound obviously is below threshold. Yeah. It's sound we cannot hear. Yeah. So what you're doing is effectively measuring lead vibration. It's below the frequency that our cochlea can. Yeah. So in theory, you know, we cannot, as human beings, we cannot detect. That's why it's infrasound in the first place. So I mean, there has been talk of that affecting people. On a, not to say that it doesn't influence people. Well, like I said, there's been a whole load of medical studies that have not come out with any link. Thing is, though, if I remember rightly, the international standard of wind farm operators and stuff, when they do their EIA, it's at IEC 61400 pilot. Yeah. The measuring devices that you're using are the DBA, which is filtered. It's weighted for human hearing. Yeah. Human hearing. So there isn't. How would you, if you're not looking? It's a bit like listening for bats when you haven't got a detector that can go up to the frequency. You set it downwards. That's it. The studies have been done, but they've not been able to detect any infrasound.
Well, that's not really the case. The studies have detected the infrasound. What they're claiming is it has no effect on humans. Well, some studies and other studies say it has severe effects on humans. In fact, one of the investigators who went to investigate the sound in a house about 600 meters away from the turbine actually was ill within minutes of entering the building and had to leave, came well again, and back again became ill. So that statement there is not quite true.
Beyond about 60 meters from the turbine. What about resonance in buildings? So that was further, you know, like when it's resonating on a. I mean, it goes back to. I mean, I've used this debate before, and it's semi-backfired. But the Estelmere seismic monitoring station. Well, they've just had a knockback because there's a wind farm that's trying to go in there. Like 2 days ago, they've been knocked back. Yeah, but there's also 1,700 turbines within 30, 50 kilometres. Yeah, within that 50 kilometres, there's already. No, they're not. No, now there's not. There's already a load in there.
Well, there's a claim telling you how many turbines are within the area they're discussing, that particular area, and then immediately afterwards, when challenged, he says, well, there's not.
Right. That's what I was trying to say previously. But why is it that they're not now? Because effectively they're worried that it will exceed the threshold for the detector. And the detector's measuring infrasound. It's measuring infrasound across a third of the globe. It's the most sensitive detector. You know, it detected the Russian people moving in a Russian submarine. Yeah. The coast of Norway. Yeah. It's that level of detector. Like the detector itself is, I can't remember how many kilometres long it is to operate. Way bigger than a building, way bigger than a human being could ever detect. And that can operate with over 1,000 turbines.
I'll just interrupt this audio for a while. I've got to go back to it because I get really tired of people stating things that simply aren't true. The purpose of the seismic station there is detecting nuclear explosions. Now, yes, if there's a big explosion in the distance, it can get it. So we're looking at the Kursk submarine there, which was hundreds and hundreds of miles away, and they picked it up, yeah. But they won't allow further wind turbines there in the area because it could interfere. They can maybe mask that out, but more would just interfere, may overload, according to Paul Evans' own admission, may overload the sensor so that you can't have them. The point is that the overloading of the sensor would be infrasound. And I just think it's sad if consultants try to bamboozle people in any way. And I'm not happy with a number of the statements being made. The problem for Paul Evans here is simply that he has a knowledgeable person asking him the questions, a person who's researched it. That is the problem. Most of the time, consultants can get away with this.
The longer the blade, the lower the frequency because of the barometric pressure of the oscillations. Yeah, but they're sort of. It's like a 2 megawatt. Yeah, but the bigger the blade, the slower it spins. Yeah, but that doesn't stop the barometric oscillation waves. What I'm saying is, if you've got a 2 megawatt turbine, the blade length is so short, you're never going to have that issue with infrasound. It's only when you start getting up over sort of 5 megawatts, the length extends, and then you start having measurable 2-3 hertz, which is way below the 20 hertz that the current international standards at. So this is the point. The problem's getting worse. The turbines are getting bigger. Like I say, there's recorded issues with infrasound. You know.
In practice, of course, there are many recorded matters, many recorded issues with infrasound. I've shown you a few, and there's many research papers also. And of course, it's only relatively recently that the bigger turbines above 2 are coming into play. And so the older turbines, which are much smaller, didn't have the same problems. As you increase the size of the turbine, you increase the infrasound. You only have to look at that line of people against one of the blades on that turbine to understand the scale of things we are talking about here.
It's actually been measured, created, assessed. It's been raised lots of times by people objecting to wind farms, but no one's actually found that if or people who've experienced it, I suppose. Otherwise, there would be nobody saying anything. Well, yeah, but again, there was no evidence. Like I say, it's similar to the whole wind turbine syndrome thing. Do you live near? Are you living near one somewhere? Where is that? In Cornwall, yeah. That Goonhilly one? No, I don't live near Goonhilly. I live near another one. It's just Carlton Cross. Similar turbines, though. Yeah. So what size are they? They're 2 megawatts. 2 megawatts. For 2 megawatts, you're talking about a third of the wavelength, aren't you? So you're probably talking 8 or 9 hertz, maybe 10 hertz. Is the like the actual the frequency of the wave. So as soon as you start going to the bigger one, it's a bit like a musical wind instrument. The longer you make it, the lower the tone. Yeah, but that also depends on how fast you move. That's what I'm saying. The speed drops. Well, there's 3 of them, isn't there? There's 3 blades. Yeah, but even so, the speed drops dramatically, so the change isn't as dramatic. It's not the same as. Isn't the leading edge the blade at the tip is moving faster than it is on a 2 megawatt or similar speed? Same.
Well, at one time here, Paul Evans is stating the bigger blades actually rotate more slowly. In actual fact, the tip speeds of all the blades approach 200 miles an hour. 200 miles an hour tends to be about the limit for the tip speed, because past that you get a turbulence which actually reduces the efficiency of the blade. It's to do with that. And so it is completely untrue that it goes slower. And in fact, he agrees that the tip speed's about the same, no matter what the turbine.
200 miles an hour. The problem is, if you allow them to go faster, it would take almost no increase to start breaking the sound barrier with the tip. Yeah. So they're designed to operate the same. The tip speed is designed to be the same regardless of the length of the blade. Right. And then, speaking of blade edge, there's talk about the erosion problems.
Well, you're simply incorrect there. The speed of sound is over 700 miles an hour in static air. It varies a bit, depending on height and so on, but it's in that sort of region, nothing like 200 miles an hour. No, the real reason is to do with the turbulence and the hydrodynamics, if you like, of the air passing over the blade. Nothing whatsoever to do with getting anywhere near the speed of sound. I apologise for the poor sound quality on that audio recording, but I wanted to use it as an example of how the wind farm industry just is basically in denial. And there were many claims that Consultant was making which are just absurd. Things like, you can hear detect people walking on a submarine maybe 1,000 miles away or something. Ridiculous. It was a nuclear explosion on a submarine, actually. Known, it's a very famous one, the Kursk. So, but the point there, of course, is they won't allow more wind farms there because the infrasound may overwhelm the sensors. Look, there is no doubt there's infrasound, and there is no doubt as you get very low in it, down to the 1 or 2 hertz, you're going to get vibration in buildings, and these bigger turbines give that. So you do end up with more sound inside than outside even, and you don't feel this, but your body does. And the doctor I mentioned earlier, the German woman doctor, she's done great studies. She goes into great detail on the effect on the human body on this and how the cell linings and all this are affected. And basically, we're not made to have these high pressure pulses through our body continually. But here are some studies here. I'll try to quickly cover them to give you a flavour of what has been done. But there is an enormous amount of information out there on this, and I ask you to research it. Please share this video with people who are opposing wind farms. There's going to be a lot of them now in the UK as Ed Miliband's stopped the onshore ban. So please share, because people should be made aware of this, and there are professional sound audio people who deal with this, who will support you in the fight against the madness of wind farms. Well, this 2012 study is a fairly famous one. It's in Falmouth, Massachusetts, and it was about a house. The house was 560 yards away from the turbine. In this particular case, when the researchers went to examine the house, they became ill almost immediately. And one of them actually was permanently medically damaged, if you like, as a result of the work there. Falmouth, Massachusetts has experienced non-predicted adverse acoustic and health impacts from an industrial wind turbine sited close to neighbours. The public response from this quiet rural area has been very vocal. For a majority of the homeowners living within 3,000 feet, complaints have ranged from unexpectedly loud with constant fluctuations and non-audible pressure fluctuations, causing a real loss of public health and well-being. The early research indicates that both IRC and OHC fluctuations of the ear receive stimulations during moderate to strong wind speeds. This research presents a challenge to noise control and health professionals to determine the causal factors for the adverse public health impacts. This case study presents sound level and analysed measurements data obtained whilst living in a house 1,700 feet away from an operating IWT, industrial wind farm turbine, during moderate to strong hub height and wind speeds. There was a strong correlation with wind speed, power output and health symptoms. So that's one study, link in description. Now back to that German doctor. Her work actually poses the infrasound as a huge threat to all biodiversity, to all living things, because of the damage to the cell structure that can happen. And this work was in 2024, so it's recent work. These are her comments. Dr. Bellert-Stark said there are currently no studies to clearly illustrate or prove the risk of infrasound, as most studies focus on acoustic or audible sound. However, initial studies on the effects of infrasound indicate possible serious health problems. One study published in Environmental Disease concluded there was a high probability that people living near industrial wind turbines would experience harmful health effects due to anxiety, stress and loss of sleep resulting from exposure to infrasound and other emissions. A German study also identified the toxic effects of infrasound exposure at cellular level. Another study published in PLOS ONE documented brain activity changes following exposure to infrasound stimulation. These studies emphasize a need for further research and a better understanding of the impacts of infrasound. Now, this is already a long video, and I could carry on and on with studies like that. And the real point is this. This is not a settled matter. So no one should be imposing wind turbines, I'd say within 1.5 miles, and many of the recommendations I have seen are 1.5 miles to be reasonably safe from infrasound. And you shouldn't be, and that's a 3-mile diameter around each one. It's a big area. And don't forget, that's only one of the problems, infrasound. We've got the pollution from the erosion of the plastic blades. These things, with tips travelling at 200 miles an hour nearly, are shedding microplastics all over, and they do it in every direction. Of course, the wind turbines turn 360 to catch the wind, no matter which direction it's blowing from. So there are huge environmental problems here. The industry, as I've tried to show you, simply ignores them. They make statements like, there is no evidence. I've just shown you some, and I could carry on showing you more and more. But I don't know what the point is here, whether I should do that, really. Just carry on boring you sick now with more and more evidence. There's a lot of it. The essence of this is this. It's too risky. We shouldn't be doing it. And the way the environment is pushed to one side with wind turbines and solar for that matter is incredible. I know in Wales it's strategic, no environmental study. Yeah, no environmental study allowed. In the Isle of Man, the recent posters they've been putting up, the wind farm people, saying we'll relocate all the hen harriers, all the bats. And what do you mean relocate? Are you going to take a hen harrier nest and put it somewhere else? Don't be silly. And they just brush aside the environmental factors. Why? Because this mad, extreme, an extreme rush to net zero, which is not even doing anything for us. It has no effect on the planet whatsoever. It is total madness. And we've got to stop our politicians doing this. It's nonsense. Well, I'm going to terminate this video with a sort of kaleidoscope of the research papers and testimonials to give you an idea that there is a problem. And you will not know how bad it's going to affect you if there's a wind farm within a few miles of you until it's up. Wind farm ILFN was found to exceed the audibility threshold at distances up to 4 kilometres from the wind farm and to undergo